I'm Riley Reese. This is a Sophia Unfiltered podcast, where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. Here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sophia Unfiltered. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down to talk to Reverend Dr. Snyder. She is a doctor, an educator of the healing arts, a mental health counselor, psychologist, and an ordained minister. There are so many things that this woman does, and she believes that healing comes in many forms. She lectures across the United States about mental health, spirituality, and healing. With her 33 years of combined experience as a mental health professional and a wellness guide, she is always ready to be of service and support to the human condition. Reverend Dr. Snyder, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to speak with you and just hear all about your wisdom. And we're just going to dive right into it. So for our listeners who may not know about your journey, we always like to start off with asking our guests to tell us a little bit about your story and what led us into the health and wellness field. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself.
Since early childhood, I had the experience of knowing firsthand how mental health can impact child raising. As a child, my parents, both very highly educated, very well informed, yet both did have severe mental health issues. And as a result of that, recognizing all the different systems, trying to attempt to navigate while growing up with individuals that were struggling with mental health, recognizing that it was not just a one answer solution. And as a result of that, that really put me on the road to wondering how can we get to health? Because the one word answers and the one-stop shops, we're not doing it. And as a result of that, that really led me to this journey of overall wellness, and that having been on the receiving end of what that's like, I might definitely have something to share from both sides of the desk.
We cannot wait to hear more about it. And overall wellness is definitely something that we'll have to get into. So I couldn't agree more with you that when we're looking at raising children today, that the mental health of the parents of that individual are so important. And I feel like so many of past experiences have gone undiagnosed or underserviced, depending on the different circumstances. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your own personal experience with coming to those conclusions and how that brought you into discovering overall wellness.
In my earlier education, wanting to understand, have a better understanding of what was happening in my own life, in my own family life, I stuck to the field of psychology, had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I was doing it as a learning experience for myself to have a better understanding of the whole picture of what had been my life. And through my undergraduate work, always having that opportunity to sign up to be a peer support counselor, it's something I've always believed in because I could see the benefits of what it meant to talk to someone. And in my undergraduate, being able to demonstrate that volunteer experience and what I was able to convey in the classroom, one of my instructors, and I'll always be so thankful for her, she said, "Have you ever thought about being a therapist?" And I said, "What's that?" And she shared all of that. And that really propelled me really into the deeper work that I do nowadays. But if it wasn't for that one instructor that was so aware in that moment, that mindful moment, it's amazing in that one mindful moment, if we are able to hear it, if we are able to share it, and if we are able to receive it, what a difference our lives can become because of that one moment. So I am very thankful that was that one pivotal moment.
That's so incredible. And I feel like there's so much truth to that as well. I feel like as a society, we tend to not question things And from your story, it sounds like that one question was life altering for your, not only your career, but for your entire well-being as well.
Yes. And as a result of that, recognizing that mental health is not just solely to the individual. And here in Western mainstream culture, we are very individualistic in nature. Our three favorite people, me, myself, and I. And so we recognize that we do not grow in isolation, nor are we meant to exist in isolation. We are meant to be connected. And with that, our mental health is connected to one another. And it allowed me to take on wanting to work with children and families because really the mental health, as you shared, the mental health is not just within the individual. The parent's mental health is so powerful and how that can impact good, bad, or indifferent, how it can impact those young children. And with that, I've been able to specialize in child and adolescent treatment for an extensive amount of my career. And as a result of that, naturally moving on into it's not just about the children. I recognized I was doing far more work, and I still do far more work with the adults than I do with the children. And recognizing that when the adults are on board, when they're ready to really take on what it is to mean to have their mental health checked in order to support their children, that's where I see the growth. That's where I see healing starting to take place. It really is in a more well-rounded structure than it is just a hierarchical order or an individualistic need. It really is that interconnectedness that allows us to get healthier.
Well, and I feel like it's such a simplistic notion to think about how child raising and experiencing the human condition is supposed to be communal. But as a society, we tend to almost champion the idea of, well, I can do everything on my own and I got to look out for me, myself, and I. And like all of these praises and accolades and these external validators are really looking to put the individual efforts or the nuclear family structure is like something to be done alone and by yourself. And to the contrary, like we are supposed to support one another. We need a team of not only just wellness professionals, but people who care to help us. And I think that the work that you're doing just speaks so highly of that.
I appreciate it. And to share about what that means for us to take on that individualistic me, myself, and I mentality. I always like to share with my students that we're going to work on reconnecting to each other because how we are trained, how we are taught here in my humble little corner of the world in the United States, we have to remember that our underlying philosophical components start off with the belief that we are autonomous by nature. And of course, we want to celebrate that independence. However, unfortunately, that autonomy, that independence, that tended to invade our belief systems about how we are in our connection with each other. That somehow it all starts with the individual and then it pervades into a social interconnected system. And we have that backwards because when I teach my students the difference between how we approach mental health in Western mainstream culture versus non-Western mainstream culture, the collectivist cultures, which is basically the rest of the world except for us and some parts of Europe, we recognize the collectivist is always been about that we are individuals, but we are so much bigger than an individual. We are part of something greater. And as a result of being part of something greater, that means that we have to connect in and recognize that the other is just as valuable as ourselves. And we have lost so much of that ability to recognize that our healing is only as strong as the other person that's being healed as well. And so in our individualistic culture, we don't have that mentality of reaching out to others and saying, how are you doing today? Unless it's something that we have a goal or a task to accomplish. It really isn't just checking in any longer. And I don't want to get into the digital divide, but when I work with children, teenagers, adults, when I see them with their phones, I'm like, I have a phone policy. That means it is off. That means tuning in, tune out of the digital media that takes them in that space that keeps them isolated. Turn that off and tune in. A lot of times I like to share that digital media, it's so incredibly important. Of course, nowadays it allows us to recognize what else is going on in the world. But if we're not able to step up out of our own individualistic mentality, what we hear is only a reporting of what's going on for other people. It doesn't invite us in to check up and see how we can be of value to that other person, because eventually that will come back to us. So we are so much more divided, even though we are so much more connected in the digital era.
Wow, that is so profound, Dr. Snyder. And as a therapist, are you seeing this more? I mean, with younger kids, when the age is getting younger for them to have cell phones, and sometimes it's out of necessity. Are you seeing that it's creating more of this gap? The more online we become and the more social media driven kids have access to all this at such a younger age. Are you starting to see this be created in these habits among children a lot younger?
Absolutely. And a unique thing that I am understanding, because I love when my clients, my young clients and my teenagers, when they teach me about their language in digital media, and it's their language. And that tells me that is not a language that the adults know unless the adults tap in. And so when I throw out every once in a while, I'll say, give me a juicy term that I can, and I tell them, help me teach my college students, the next generation. What are some words that you want them to know? What are those buzzwords? And so they'll give me those buzzwords, and I'll say them to my students, and they'll start to laugh, and they'll go, oh, Dr. Snyder, you know the lingo. I'm like, I have to learn your language in order to support you. If I don't know the language, how will I know to tell you that this person is really just trying to butter you up, trying to get you to do something for them? They're not trying to be your friend. So I need to learn your language so that I can help you navigate some of the human relationship dynamics that are just as old as time. About how do you know who is a good and safe person? How do you know that it's a good friendship? How do you know that, what you're doing is appropriate? So in order to know that, we have to learn the language. But if we're not tapping in, because oftentimes the phone is a babysitter. What I have learned about the digital divide and phones and all the different platforms and apps that are out there, there are so many different things that are happening and changing that if we as adults aren't allowing this babysitter phenomenon happen, if we say, put down the phone, eye contact on me, how is your day? What's going on in your world? What a difference that would make. We have so many children, unfortunately, finding themselves being paid attention to through the digital media by a stranger. And if they don't have that guide of that parent saying, you don't know this person is not your friend. How do we know what makes a good friend? We cannot tap into that so that we can give them instruction so that they don't run away in the middle of the night to meet somebody because they told them that you're the most beautiful person that they've ever seen. That need for attention, that basic attention, as we recognize if they're seeking it through social media, we are definitely looking at a greater gap between the connection of the adults and the children, because that phenomenon of what I love to call the digital babysitter, it helps. It helps in those moments when the adults need a timeout or time away. But unfortunately, we don't pick back up. We just disconnect and just check in when it's dinner time. That's what I see in terms of the danger. We're losing the language because we're not tapping into the youngsters any longer. We just want to know, what are their grades like? The friends that they show, are they presentable? But they have a whole different life on digital media, and we need to tap back into that. The children are becoming more isolated, and the parents are unfortunately failing to be able to tap back in. And part of it is, once again, looking at these structures, the individualistic culture, that it's okay to let your children to be independent, but really not understanding what that means in its entirety.
Oh, I am literally like vibrating whole body, because it's like, I was an educator for 10 years and I can only speak to this from that side of the curtain, but you could not have hit the nail any harder on the head, where it's like, I tended, like, instead of the digital babysitter term, I ended up just calling it hotel room service parenting, where it's like there's a continental breakfast in the morning and everyone kind of sees each other, but there's no actual communication. And then the kids go off to school, the parents go about their day, they come back, everybody's in their own individual rooms, or they could literally be in different rooms, even all sitting on the couch, because they're in their own digital rooms on their devices, whether it's the parents continuing to work from home on the emails, kids are in video game spaces, on social media platforms, whatever it might be. And there's no actual connection. And then even dinner is like grab and go options. It's almost like vending machine type of exchange. And then we go on to our own separate rooms and so on and so forth. So it's incredible how, as a society, we champion autonomy. There's a reason for that independence, no doubt. And, right, the conjunction of, and we have to also reconnect. And part of that is, like you said, meeting these young people on their digital platforms, but also putting up boundaries around both for the parents and the children on when are we in the same physical space, not the digital space, or in the same physical space, but emotionally and mentally not even there anymore. So, man, we could have like episodes and episodes on that one. But yes, like we have to get into that. And I think that there's just so much psychology behind even getting children to understand how to recognize not even just safety, unsafe situations, but just physical markers to read in terms of social interaction. I will never forget, I had a student come up to me once in the hallway and she was just like, "You're making me so uncomfortable." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, why? I'm so sorry. Like, please let me know so I can make sure to not do that again." And she looked me straight in the face and she goes, "You make too much eye contact with me." And I had to explain to her that I made eye contact with her because I valued what she said. And she explained to me that it made her uncomfortable because she preferred the digital space to connect with people. And so it was exactly one of those moments that you're talking about where there is such a disconnect between not only the language barriers, but like the actual ways that we physically are interacting with one another in a shared environment.
Yes. And it's interesting that how you phrased where I went with the digital babysitter. I have had conversations on more than one occasion these days about how children need to be raised and room and board is not the same. It's not the same concept. And being able to really break that open about what does that mean to nurture. I have had parents and children sitting in my sessions, literally. My practice has been for several parents and children is to just have eye contact with each other and talk to each other. And the healing that takes place in that moment, because when those little eyes meet the adult eyes, because I also teach them about how parents, even in their body language, how important that is, because when you're standing, remember that you're taller than your child. And that when you are standing and you are looking down, you are in the dominance position. And we want to encourage, here's the healthy part where we try to encourage independence. We come down to their eye level so that we are letting them know that what they have to say is of importance to us. And so with that, just having parents and children practice eye contact and talk to each other. When I started that in my practice, I thought to myself, I'll never have any more parents and kids coming through my door ever again, because that's what they were doing. They were practicing, and they actually asked. They asked when they would come in, could they just spend a little bit more time doing that? I was providing the safe space. I was providing the directorship on something that we would assume happens so naturally, but we recognize unless it's role modeled to us, we can't do it. And so it is in those sessions that I have been told, Dr. Snyder, I feel more connected to my kid. We talk. I didn't know this was going on for them. We've been able to talk about it because of the practice of they're in a safe space, eye to eye, and they're talking and they're listening to each other. And it's in those intimate moments that I really saw a substantial amount of healing, even for those youngsters that I work with that have had severe traumatic backgrounds.
Oh, absolutely. And I just feel like there's so many different ways that we're seeing this translate across our Western societal when it comes to having children and moving from this room and board to actually getting back to basics, right? With connecting with our children, connecting with ourselves, but also raising them. And I think that to your point, like there are ways to problem solve this. And I feel like we're seeing this pop up in what I mean by that is I feel like parents more than ever are probably feeling the confrontation of having the disconnect on display as a result of the COVID pandemic, with kids going back to school now with less hybrid class options and getting them out of the house and different things like that. I think that when we first invited children to stay at home with parents working from home, I think that there was so much cheer and joy around the intention behind that. But when they were confronted with sharing the same space for a prolonged amount of time, I think to your point, the digital babysitter got put on the payroll really quick. And it's really interesting to see now that we are moving back into classrooms with these kiddos and bringing them back into the room and board type of stuff, what we're going to see and how that translates. But to your point, I'd love to dig in a little bit more into these problem solving techniques that families can start implementing, because I feel like something as simple as making eye contact with a family member, right? Anybody can do that from any demographic. And I would love to hear a little bit more about what are some of these just simple back to basic things that we can do to reconnect with our family members.
I am so glad that we have been able to segue into this area, because the first thing that I tell everybody is that we have to get comfortable again with discomfort. Our digital era has created this sense of make it happen quickly and keep me pleasantly entertained. But the moment that there is struggle, the moment that there is conflict, there is this want to shut that down. And as a result of that, we lose that ability to problem solve. And so first things first, when I tell anyone that comes in for mental health support, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. With every first day of class, with every student I work with, I tell them, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because problem solving is a process. We have to have a certain level of stress, because there's good stress and there's bad stress. There's the eustress, eustress. That is the good stress, and oftentimes underplayed, undermined. But it's the good stress that we start to experience in the problem solving process, because if we don't have that, it doesn't create that elevation of critical thinking to try and stay in the present moment and work through it. But that means we have to be uncomfortable. That means we're trying out different things that takes us out of our comfort zone. And so the very first thing, basic, is if we're going to practice figuring out things, we've got to practice being uncomfortable. And that's something in our culture that we really, at least in my humble opinion, there seems to be that great need or desire to move away from anything that makes us uncomfortable. We are losing our problem solution skills in this next generation, because the level of discomfort, oftentimes I see parents, of course, and I give accolades to parents who want to make sure that their children don't unnecessarily struggle. But the word unnecessarily is a key word because it doesn't mean that they cannot struggle or that they shouldn't struggle. There should be some discomfort. There should be some struggle to it, because in order to develop the new, something old must fall away. And that means the old ways of thinking. That means our old comfort zones must fall away. So if we can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, that means in this present moment, we're more apt to actually listening to what is being offered to be practiced, to be thought about, to be tried.
Dr. Snyder, and I just want to touch on what you said earlier as well. And you also mentioned the irony, I guess, of a lot of parents bringing their children in to see you for mental health, right? I can see this, right? It's hard if they're learning a different language, they have this digital divide, they're being isolated. So there's this hard to understand and navigate the space between they're independent and versus isolated. So first of all, I love that. And really what I want to touch on is, how do you find it when they come in? And I guess the parents can you just walk us through that? The parents, for all of our listeners, do they just come in and they're like, help me, here's my child, we need help? And are they surprised when you come back and bring them in more of the conversation? And what does that look like? So for our listeners can maybe identify and start figuring out, how do they start, navigating this space themselves for those who have children?
For the parents, when the parents first give me a call, I will ask them, well, tell me in a nutshell, what is bringing them to want to seek out mental health? And it's always it always starts out with my child. And then I definitely am listening to the narrative, because of course, everyone's narrative is their truth. And so it is so important that we honor everyone's truth. And so as I hear it, I start to invite in that it sounds like they have a great deal of understanding of what the problem is from their perspective. And I would love to hear the perspective from other family members, especially their child. And so I let the parents know when they first come into my office how this will be set up. I invite both the parent or parents and the child into the session. And I actually offer up who would like to talk first. And so it lets me know a couple of things. One, who is actually paying attention, who's not on their phone, because I give everyone a few minutes to just settle in. And you'd be surprised how many people start pulling out their phone and they segue into, oh, well, let's talk about this schedule. Let's talk about that schedule. And then the next few minutes, everyone gets quiet, settled down, and they're all on their phone. And that's a very interesting thing. And so I say, okay, well, who would like to start first? Why are we here? And so sometimes the youngster would look up at me, but then they'll look to the parent, and then they'll expect the parent to start talking. And then, of course, I'll say, well, I love to hear from the youngster. And I would say to them, and of course, I don't use words like youngster and child. I'm very, I definitely want to be respectful, because that's the one thing. A lot of times children don't receive the due respect that they deserve. And that is that individual calling by name, not being referred to as a child or the teenager, but to call them by name. And so I bring them into the room by calling them by name and asking them from their humble opinion, what brings them in? And I ask them to look at me, because then I'll check to see if they start looking, and they start looking back to the parent. And I'm like, okay. That tells me one thing. It tells me two things. It either, am I going to say, I'm going to watch you to see if I need to filter what I need to say, or is it okay that I talk? It lets me know what are the power dynamics. And so there's that point of, in your humble opinion, look at me and tell me in your own words, why do you think you're here? And then I will actually ask the parent to leave so that I can talk to the youngster, because I always let the parent know I had a chance to talk to them on the phone. I didn't have a chance to talk to their child. So I want to take that opportunity. That gives a parent the opportunity to go into the break room, my little waiting area, while I really sit and I talk to the youngster about, did you know that you were going to be here today? Do you know why you're here today? I am trying to invite them in to recognize that this isn't just about them. And so they share with me, they start to open up a little bit about how they see things going on in their lives. But then I I also ask them, how is their relationship with their parent? How are their relationships with their family? And I'll ask them, what do you want to get out of counseling? I know your parent brought you here, but what do you want out of counseling? What would you like to see different? And I tell them it could be anything about you, about anything. What would you like to see different? And then they actually tell me what they'd like to see different. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to be with, I want my family to spend time together. I want to spend time with my family. I miss my parent. I miss doing this. I just feel like I am just this person. And so it lets me know that these children are craving that connection. It takes more than just living under the same roof to be connected. And that's what I share with the children and I share with the parents. And I love to do this communication exercise. I have them sit back to back and I explain to them, if we have difficulties trying to describe what it is that we see to another person, can we imagine how hard it is to try and describe concepts about our feelings? And so I have them do this communication exercise. I have them look at a picture. One person looks at a picture, the other person to their back. They're supposed to draw the picture. And so I have them actually look. I have them look at the picture that was drawn and they're like, wow. I'm like, yeah, let's take that in. So if it was difficult to try, and very clearly they could see the picture, I'm trying to convey to them from their perspective, from their humble corner of the world, how they see things happening. It's very hard to convey that to another person. So we really have to bring this back to basics and learn to really talk to one another. And it means not just saying things to each other. It means being able to include so many deeper layers of what it means to actually have a full-blown conversation. We talk with our eyes. We talk with our hearts. We talk with our emotions. And then I also teach them every step along the way, developmentally, appropriate ages and stages of common sense so that parents can stop saying, but you should know better. And I would tell them, through your adult lens, looking back, you can say that. But when you were in their shoes, you cannot say that was common sense to you. So I'm also inviting in recognizing developmental stages for everybody so that everyone can get a little bit more of a break about, oh, so it's not just always about what we're not doing right. These are pieces of information that are missing from the formula. And so I like to plug in, like I say, I like to plug into those areas where there are pieces missing to help them just get back to or pick up on something new that they can take with them for the rest of their days. Because I say to them, when you learn how to listen, you will learn how to tap into yourself and you will learn how to respond. And this is a gift that will take you through the rest of your days, no matter whatever it is you choose to do, because you have learned how to interact with the human condition and you cannot put a price on that.
Oh, just chills, like literal chills. And it's like, I mean, like, it's so simple, right? And we all know these things to be fundamental truths, regardless of background, regardless of direction in life. And it always comes back to like the discomfort zone that you're talking about. We know that there is not a single thing in the natural world that doesn't occur stress in order to grow, whether it's the seasons, whether it's, extreme heat, drought. Like we're all calling in from California today. And it's like, people think of California as like the most beautiful place on earth with the most perfect neutral weather. And it's like, yes. And we also have severe heat. We also have droughts. We also have like these tropical things that come up, and all of those things stress for growth in the natural world. And I think that from that, when we're translating this into reconnecting with our human selves and our family members and these people that we value the most in our life, that communication, but the listening. And what I loved so much about what you were speaking on is that listening is more than just what we hear. It's listening for the nonverbal communication cues. What are they emotionally asking for in their words? What am I seeing while I'm listening? What am I experiencing? How am I hearing this? And from that intelligent listening, we are really plugging into that connection with that person. And we're able to not only receive what they're trying to communicate more clearly, but we can also communicate more effectively in response to that. And from that, it grants one another the respective autonomy. I value who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're trying to say, because I too, in turn, feel valued, respected, seen, heard. And that's where that reconnection can occur. Woo! Chills.
There is a little story that I always like to share at the end of every semester and at the end of the work when I have done substantive work with clients, whether it's families or it's children or teenagers or adults. And the students that I work with, on the very last day of class, I share with them my story about I always have a butterfly in my hair. And I tell them, if you are here on the last day of class, I will tell you why I wear a butterfly in my hair. And so here's my little story that I give everybody. The reason why I wear a butterfly in my hair is because I was told about a very beautiful, sweet story about the power of struggle. And here's the story. One day, in a little village in Africa, there was a young boy, and he loved to go play in the wooded area. And in the hollowed out logs, there were these chrysalis. And one day he came across these chrysalis, and he knew that someday that is going to become a butterfly. And so he would visit it every day. And he would just be in awe of how it would just be very still. And then one day he noticed that it started to move. This little chrysalis started to move, and he recognized that there's something inside and it looks like it's struggling. And out of the goodness of that little person's heart, he thought he was doing the right thing. He took a little stick, he sharpened the little edge, and he actually cut open the chrysalis, and out plopped a little half-formed butterfly. One little wing wasn't quite as formed, little abdomen was extended, and the little boy just could not believe what happened. And so he took the poor little deformed butterfly and he took it to his mother, and with just the sadness in his eyes, and she came down to his eye level and she said, I may not be able to give you the answer, but let's go find out together. And so they went to the elder in the village. And so the mother described what had taken place, because the little boy, his eyes were down, looking at the ground. He was so embarrassed and so ashamed. And the elder, in their wisdom, came down to the eye level of the youngster and said, what you have done, you did with good intention. But let me explain to you what happened. You saw this little creature and it was struggling, and you thought the best thing to do was to help it. And what you did was you opened it up right as it was getting ready to take on the biggest task, which was to learn how to press against the wall so the wings could become stronger, so that it could learn within itself how to be able to fly and be able to do those things that should become so natural for them, but they must struggle in order to understand what that means. So if the little boy was able to just sit with someone else's discomfort, they might have been able to see a product that was that could have been the most amazing product. So I tell people, when you see that butterfly in my hair, let me struggle. When you see me in my process, appreciate my struggle. Let me struggle so that I can fly farther and higher than I ever have been before. And that's why I tell my students, that's why I let you engage in the struggle, so that you can fly farther than you ever imagined.
Wow, that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you. That is definitely something I like to share, because that is such a beautiful, sweet story about something that is so simplistic, yet resonates so true for us as we are in our struggle. Some people want to remove that from us, and that's beautiful. And the unnecessary struggle, remove the unnecessary struggle, but let the rest of the problem solution process take place. Let us find ourselves in the struggle and appreciate it.
Now I see why you say this is get comfortable with the uncomfortable process of problem solving.
Yes.
It's not easy. And I also think it's beautiful because this lens to all sorts of situations with our whole health, right? Not just the mental health piece of this, but what we're doing is we're trying to build these critical thinking skills to go through problem solving to really get to what I hear you saying by this is get to the root cause of these issues with our mental health. Can you speak a little bit, Dr. Snyder, on some of the techniques and some of these different complementary health techniques that you're bringing in? I feel like you're bringing in such a spiritual, overall health, wellness therapist hat. I feel like it's really powerful that you're bringing so much experience and education and wisdom to these sessions, which I think is beautiful. Can you speak to a little bit more of the different techniques you like to work with?
Sure. Some of the more traditional techniques they do revolve around this concept of mindfulness. And that is the ability to tap back into oneself, to recognize that we exist in truly one space, and that's now. Our history is our history, and tomorrow we can prepare for, but it is in the now that we must learn how to tap back into. So mindfulness techniques about being able to experience the outdoors, put your feet in the grass, put your face toward the sun, being able to describe the different sensations that we experience, like our sight. What do we see? What do we smell? What are we hearing? Being able to ground us back in that moment. And when I take that approach, I also help them to recognize that the help isn't just about coming to Dr. Snyder. It's being able to tap into all the other resources that we have that help us to become healthier. We are what we eat. We are impacted by what we wear. We are recognizing that we are not just one-sided in terms of mental health care is multifaceted. It's not just with the counselor. It's meeting up with other individuals. I have been able to talk to other people I have people that talk about what it means to sit over tea and to be able to definitely enjoy a wonderful cup of tea for its healing benefits, but it's in the power of the connection too. Those types of things, being able to connect back into, I do believe in traditional Western medicine, but I definitely believe in Eastern practices. And in all truth, it used to always be a global practice. So those pieces of being able to go and talk to somebody that can talk about the overall arcing picture of how do they see themselves in the world. Of course, from a mental health perspective, my job is to help them do a lot of cognitive shifts from some of that stinking thinking that a lot of us experience. But I also tell them to make sure that they join that support group, that they are tapping into those things that give them that sense of self-care. Whatever it has been, from music to you name it, I let them know it is something that if it's giving them health, that's healing. It's not just the counselor. We are a team. We are an entire team when we are working with the human condition. So I definitely will recommend also books to read. I definitely expect them to go out and find those things that give them that sense of additional care. And I will actually look it up with them so that we can have a conversation about, what are you getting out of this? What are you recognizing? What are you noticing? What's the difference between sitting with Dr. Snyder and sitting with that self-care need? What's the difference? So good, you're noticing and you're recognizing you can receive support in so many different ways. There's more than just one way to navigate this.
Well, and I think the most beautiful thing behind all of these resources that you share is that in its essence, you are teaching them how to help themselves. And that is such a lost art in which we tend to try to compartmentalize our well-being or compartmentalize any part of our life, our connection with it, and so on and so forth. And I think that when we grant people the compassion and the space to personalize how they are learning how to take care of themselves, that is truly when we will see healing on any level. And I could not agree more with all of the beautiful work that you are doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And the interesting thing is you mentioned compassion. And as part of my seminary studies, I had a very wonderful mentor who was my very dear best friend, and he has passed away since, but he has left me with some beautiful nuggets of wisdom. And he taught me that compassion, when we break it down and we recognize its kernel truth, it means to suffer alongside with. So that means that we are working in the struggle together alongside each other. So it's okay to be in your struggle while somebody's struggling alongside with you. Be in the struggle together, honor that space within one another, and then also recognize that if we can be in the struggle together, we can be in the healing together. Let the healing commence. But it means to suffer alongside with. And what a beautiful way to say that we can struggle and still be of value to other people.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like it's such an uncommon practice nowadays, unless you're, involved in this realm of health and wellness, or you are really a huge fan of Brene Brown. But it's understanding the difference between sympathy and empathy. And in the wisdom that you just shared, I'm almost reminded of the scene at the end of The Lord of the Rings, where it's like Sam looks to Frodo and he just bears witness to this struggle. And he's like, I can't do it for you, but I can help you, in essence, behind that message. And I think just holding the space just to be there with them and to share in the struggle, there's so much wisdom in that.
Yes. And I love how you mentioned the movie, because it is those collective symbols that help us to reconnect back with one another. So when somebody's able to make that connection, yes, the Lord of the Rings collective symbol, yes, we can talk about that. And that brings us back to our connection again.
I think this is really beautiful. And I know Lauren already touched on this, but you as a therapist really trying to empower individuals to take control of their health, I think is beautiful and huge. As somebody who's built this platform based on, we've been saying this for a long time, Lauren's part of it, build a care team. It's not one person who's going to magically solve all of your problems, whether that's in our, physical health or mental health. This is, all of us are on these journeys. How do we live our best lives? And that's not just, this fake happiness every day, but how do we feel good? We feel confident. We have the skills and resources we need to handle life stresses and struggles, and it really takes a team, right? So whether that is, your therapist, your physician, we know we need those individuals at certain points, but there's also the guided imagery, the meditation coach, the mindfulness coach. There's also sound therapy. There's books. There's also all these other resources and individuals in this health and wellness industry who can have some of the biggest and most profound impacts on your life. I think it's just so beautiful that you as a provider are not trying to bring people into your ecosystem and say, I have all of your problems and you're in my ecosystem and I can handle all of your problems and that's it. So I think it is just beyond measurable how you're trying to help people heal, and then even working with their parents and bringing them into the equation to really get to the root cause of the problem and then offer them all of the solutions. I think that speaks volumes on you as a provider. It's very impressive.
I appreciate it. I do. And I truly do believe, because there are times where I have had clients come in and I just tell them, I take a deep breath and I'm like, you really need some reassurance. I don't see any negatively impacting patterns of thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that continue to create problems, but rather I see more of that reassurance need. And, I know a bunch of wonderful individuals that can life coach, and that they can give you things that Dr. Snyder cannot give you right now. At some point in time, you may want, or you may have a need, and we can work together. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't introduce you to how it could look outside of this kind of narrow gate that, according to my license, I have to work through a narrow gate oftentimes. So I don't want you to just exist inside this narrow gate. I want you to experience more, because there's so much more to healing than oftentimes people automatically start thinking, oh, time to go to the counselor. Go to the counselor. And I hope that your counselor is able to say to you whether or not you really need counseling support. And if you don't, I hope they have good resources to send them to experience what it means to get healthy through other means.
I love this so much. For everybody in California who wants to take a holistic approach to your mental health, I hope that you get her contact information and look up Dr. Snyder. I think that this is so beautiful. I do. Even on the platform, we have the life coaches. There's a time and place for so many people, so many journeys and what people have been through. Right. And I think we all identify with different types of practitioners and health and wellness professionals. I do think that's beautiful. That's so incredible.
I like to believe that we are a team. We have many different roles, and we all have our different corners of the canvas to take care of. And if we don't allow somebody to see what else could there be, my family hails from the South. And so my grandfather always said, if you step on the neck of someone, they can't move, but neither can you. So don't disable somebody else because you're disabling yourself. And as a mental health provider, I like to call myself a healer because it's more than just mental health. It's a healer when you recognize that it is the whole person that you are attending to, not just one piece. So I proudly say I'm a healer first, and then I say, oh, and I'm a mental health counselor as well. But healer, it is because I am not the only person here. There are so many people to engage and to meet along the way.
So much wisdom. I mean, Riley and I are both beaming from ear to ear because we're just like, speak the truth. So good. Yes. But as we are coming to a close with our conversation with you today, we always like to ask our guests, and I'm sure that everyone is going to just be getting ready for whatever wisdom's about to come out of your mouth, is what is one misconception about living well that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Living well does not mean happily ever after. One of my dear friends, I will always be so thankful to him. And if he hears this podcast, he knows I'm talking about him. He came up to me one day and he said, whoever wrote "and they lived happily ever after" should be punched in the face. And I said, yes, I agree with that because it's so true. Because happily ever after, that is a sanitized smile. That is not a real smile, because that means we can have bad days and still be okay. And that means you had a bad day. Congratulations, you're a human being. That means you have feelings and you have a range of emotions. Congratulations. Welcome to you. And that it's okay. It's okay to not have a good day. It's okay to not wear a smile on your face 24/7. Sometimes we have to do it because it'll help us change our thought process. But happily ever after, it is not fair. That is not fair. That to have a bad day means we're human, because that means that we are able to experience not everything, not every creature gets to experience the emotional multiplicity that we have. And let's not deny ourselves that. So happily ever after, yeah, punch that person in the face, whoever that was. But recognize we can cry and still be okay. We can be angry and be okay. I teach people, you can still love the person. You can just not like their behaviors. And that allows us to recognize we can like ourselves, we can love ourselves, but still hate the choices that we have made. And that's okay to sit with the multiplicity of emotion. Just sit with them, though. Don't try to discard them. Don't try to minimize them. Embrace them, welcome them, but don't hold on to them forever. We're meant to visit emotional states, not live in them.
There are no truer words. And I'm sure that our listeners are as smitten and wonderfully just joyous of getting to share a moment with you today. So if our listeners want to connect more with you, fall even deeper in love with you, and learn more from you, what social channels, how would you like them to reach out to you?
I would love for them to visit my podcast, Mind Wisdom. Be on the lookout. I am going to be launching a YouTube channel where you will be able to see my nuggets of wisdom on the YouTube. So stay posted to that. Please visit me on Twitter, Dr. D at mindwisdom.net. please feel free to email me, drd@mindwisdom.net. I'm on Instagram. I am on Facebook, my ministerial role. You'll find me, the Reverend Dr. Snyder, on Facebook. So those are the platforms. Stay tuned, more to come.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Snyder. We really appreciate all the wisdom you just left us with.
I am honored and humbled to have been thought of, to be part of this moment with you, both of you. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been Sophia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sophia Health. I'm your host, Lauren Deitch. If you're interested in connecting to wellness professionals that can offer one-on-one support, visit sophiahealth.com or connect with us, our community, and providers anytime on social. If this episode resonated with you at all, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was from the episode, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform the way we take care of ourselves.